Captain Jake Morrison stared at the massive structure on the planet below. Through the bridge window of his ship, New Frontier, he could see the alien maze stretching across the dead world's surface. The crystalline walls pulsed with blue and purple light, creating patterns that hurt his eyes if he looked too long. "How big is it again?" Jake asked his science officer. Dr. Lisa Carter checked her instruments. 50 square kilometers. The walls are made of some kind of energy-infused crystal we've never seen before. The whole thing is putting out more power than our ship's reactor. Jake rubbed his chin. 3 months ago, the Coalition had discovered this place. The planet used to have life, but now it was just rock and dust. Only this maze remained, sitting in the middle of what used to be a great city. "Any word from the survey teams?" Jake asked. Lisa's face went dark. "Nothing. The Vorthak team went in first. Commander Zixtel found their ship 2 days later. Completely empty. No bodies, no signs of struggle. Just empty." Jake nodded. The Vorthak were tough aliens. They looked like giant lizards and could survive things that would kill most species. If they vanished without a trace, this place was seriously dangerous. "What about the others?" "Same thing. The Zephyrian insect team and the ethereal energy beings. All gone. 12 ships total, over 800 beings. They all just disappeared." Jake walked to the main screen and studied the readings. Every scan they ran on the maze came back with the same result. It was designed to kill. The structure had sensors everywhere, tracking systems, and what looked like weapon ports built into every wall. "Dr. Carter, what do your studies tell us about who built this thing?" Lisa pulled up her research files. "We call them the architects. They died out over 10,000 years ago. But they left structures like this all over the galaxy. This is the first one we've found that still works." "And you think there's something valuable inside?" "The energy readings suggest advanced technology, beyond anything we know. If we could understand how this works, it might change everything. Better ships, new weapons, maybe even the secret to faster space travel." Jake looked at the structure again. Something about it bothered him, but he couldn't put his finger on what. The door to the bridge opened and Commander Zixtal walked in. The big lizard alien had to duck to fit through human doorways. His scales were dark green with scars from many battles, Captain Morrison, Zixtal said in his deep voice. "I have spoken with the Coalition leaders. They want to try again." "Another survey team?" "Yes, but this time with heavy weapons and full battle armor. My best warriors are ready to volunteer." Dr. Lisa Carter spoke up. "Commander, with respect, your last team had the best armor in the Coalition. It didn't help them." Zixtal's eyes narrowed. "Then what do you suggest, human? That we give up? The knowledge inside could save many lives." Jake turned from the screen. "What exactly happens when someone goes in there?" "The maze seals behind them," Zixtal explained. "Then it begins testing them. Our long-range sensors show the structure changes for each visitor. Different rooms, different challenges. It's like the maze studies whoever enters and then tries to kill them in the most efficient way possible." "Studies them how?" Lisa checked her notes. "Bioscanners, psychological profilers, probably genetic analysis too. Within minutes it knows everything about its visitor. Then it creates the perfect death trap." Jake was quiet for a long moment. Something about this whole situation felt wrong, but not in the way everyone else thought. "Commander Zixtal, your people evolved on a safe world, right?" The big alien looked confused. "Yes. Vorthak Prime has stable weather, no dangerous animals, clean air. Why do you ask?" "And the Zephyrians?" "Same thing. They come from a world of gentle gardens and crystal caves." Jake nodded slowly. "Lisa, pull up the files on all the species that have tried to enter the maze." She worked at her console for a few minutes. "Here, 12 different species, all from what we classify as safe worlds. Stable environments, few natural predators, predictable weather patterns." "That's what I thought." Jake walked back to the window. "You know what this reminds me of? A puzzle. But not the kind where you figure out the right answer. The kind where you survive long enough to find the answer." Commander Zixtal moved closer. "What are you thinking, human?" "I'm thinking this maze wasn't built to keep everyone out. It was built to let the right kind of someone in. But every species that's tried so far came from easy worlds. They evolved to be smart and strong in predictable ways. Lisa frowned. What's your point? Jake pointed at the maze. My point is that humans didn't evolve on a nice, safe world. Earth tried to kill us every day for millions of years. Ice ages, volcanoes, earthquakes, diseases, predators, storms that could level cities. We survived because we learned to adapt to anything. You think humans have a better chance? Zixtel asked. I think humans have a different kind of chance. That maze down there studies its visitors and then creates the perfect trap for their species. But what if it encounters a species that doesn't have specific weaknesses? What if it meets something that evolved to survive everything? The bridge went quiet. Lisa stared at her captain with worry in her eyes. Jake, you're not seriously thinking of going in there. Someone has to. And I'd rather it be someone from a species that's too stubborn to know when to quit. Commander Zixtal stepped forward. Captain Morrison, I cannot allow this. The Coalition would never approve a human mission. Your species is too unpredictable. Jake smiled. Commander, that's exactly why it might work. He walked to his command chair and opened a communication channel to Admiral Helen Brooks back at Coalition headquarters. Admiral, this is Captain Morrison. I'm requesting permission to attempt entry into the Architect Maze. The response came back quickly. Permission denied, Captain. The risk is too great. Jake looked at his crew, then at Commander Zixtal. The big alien shook his head slowly. Admiral, with respect, someone needs to try. And humans might be the only species crazy enough to walk through a death trap just to see what's on the other side. There was a long pause before the Admiral replied. Stand by, Captain. Jake turned back to the window and watched the maze pulse with its alien light. Something told him this was more than just a test of strength or intelligence. This was a test of something deeper, something that most species had forgotten in their comfortable evolution, but humans had never forgotten. Earth had made sure of that. The emergency meeting took place on Harmony Point, the massive space station that served as Coalition headquarters. Representatives from 12 different species filled the main council chamber. Jake Morrison sat at the human delegation table, feeling small among the various alien forms around him. Admiral Helen Brooks stood at the center podium. She was a tough woman in her 50s who had commanded human fleets for 20 years. Her gray hair was pulled back in a military style, and her uniform was perfectly pressed. The situation is clear, Admiral Brooks announced to the assembled delegates. We have an active architect structure that has already claimed 847 lives from our survey teams. Captain Morrison has volunteered for a solo mission to investigate. A chorus of angry voices erupted from the alien delegates. Commander Zixtal rose from the Vorthak section. Admiral Brooks, this is madness. No single being should attempt what entire teams have failed to survive. The Zephyrian representative, Science Officer Quinhar, clicked his mandibles in agreement. His insect-like head turned toward the human section. The humans are known for their reckless behavior. This proves our point. Jake stood up. With respect, Science Officer Quinhar, maybe reckless is what this situation needs. Dr. Alex Turner, a human physicist who specialized in Deathworld studies, activated the main display screen. Charts and graphs filled the holographic space above the council floor. If I may address the council, Dr. Turner said, I've been studying the data from all previous attempts to enter the Architect Maze. Each team was specifically targeted by traps designed to exploit their species' weaknesses. The display showed footage from the failed missions. Vorthak warriors collapsed when the maze filled their section with a specific toxic gas that only affected their respiratory system. Zephyrian scouts were killed by sonic frequencies that disrupted their insect nervous systems. The pattern is clear, Dr. Turner continued. The maze analyzes each visitor's biology, psychology, and evolutionary background. Then it creates customized death traps. A crystalline delegate from the ethereal species spoke in a voice like wind chimes. Then, why do the humans believe they will succeed where we have failed? Dr. Turner changed the display to show Earth's classification data. Because humans evolved on a Class 12 death world. Murmurs spread through the council chamber. Many species had never heard Earth classified so extremely. What does Class 12 mean? Asked a delegate from the Peaceful Harmony species. It means everything on Earth tried to kill everything else, Jake said, standing again. Ice ages that lasted thousands of years. Volcanoes that blocked out the sun. Earthquakes that moved continents. Diseases that killed 90% of the population. Animals with claws, teeth, and poison. Admiral Brooks nodded. Human evolution was driven by constant survival pressure. We developed adaptability as our primary trait. Commander Zixtal remained skeptical. Adaptation is useful, but this maze killed my best warriors instantly. These were beings who could survive in space without protection. But they could only survive specific things, Jake replied. Your warriors evolved on Vorthak Prime, where the biggest threat is falling off a cliff. When they met something completely new, they had no response. Dr. Turner brought up more data. Humans have survived more extinction events than any other known species. We've adapted to every climate on our planet, from frozen wasteland to burning desert. Our immune systems fight diseases from every continent. We also have something most species evolved away from, Jake added. We're still afraid of things. Most advanced species eliminated fear through evolution or genetic modification. But fear keeps us alive. It makes us careful and creative when we face new threats. Science Officer Quinhar clicked his mandibles again. Fear is a primitive emotion. Civilized beings should be beyond such things. That primitive emotion is why we're still alive, Jake said. When a human sees something dangerous, we don't just analyze it, we feel it in our gut. That feeling has saved our species 1,000,000 times. The ethereal delegate floated higher, their crystalline form shimmering. Even if your emotional responses are advantageous, the maze has killed over 800 beings. The risk remains astronomical. Admiral Brooks stepped forward. Dr. Turner has calculated the odds based on human evolutionary advantages. Captain Morrison has a 12% chance of survival. 12%, Commander Zixtal roared. That is not acceptable odds for losing a valuable officer. It's 12% more than anyone else has, Jake said quietly. The council chamber fell silent. The truth of that statement hung in the air like a weight. Dr. Alex Turner cleared his throat. There's something else. The maze appears to be learning from each failed attempt. It's getting better at creating species-specific traps. If we wait much longer, it might become impossible to enter at all. A new voice spoke from the back of the chamber. Dr. Karen Bell, the chief medical officer of the human fleet, walked forward. She was a small woman with kind eyes, but her expression was serious. I've been studying the medical data from the failed missions, she said. The other species died from things that were perfectly designed to kill them. But when I run the same scenarios against human physiology, we have natural resistances that other species lack. She activated her own data display. Humans can hold their breath longer than most species. We can survive higher radiation levels because Earth's ozone layer was damaged for thousands of years. We can handle gravity changes because our ancestors climbed trees and mountains. Most importantly, Dr. Bell continued, human psychology is designed to function under extreme stress. Other species freeze up or shut down when faced with mortal terror. Humans get angry and start fighting back. Commander Zixtal shook his massive head. This is not logical. You are asking us to approve a suicide mission based on primitive emotional responses. Jake looked around the chamber at all the alien faces. Some showed concern, others showed confusion. A few showed what might have been pity. Commander, let me ask you something. If you saw a pit full of fire, what would you do? I would avoid it, naturally. And if you saw a mountain covered in ice and snow? The same. I would find a safer path. Jake nodded. That's the difference. A human would look at that pit of fire and that icy mountain and ask the same question about both of them. What question? I wonder what's on the other side. The chamber fell quiet again. Admiral Brooks stepped back to the podium. The vote is simple. Do we authorize Captain Morrison to attempt entry into the Architect Maze? The voting began. Most species voted no, exactly as expected. The Vorthak, Zephyrians, Ethereals, and others all felt the risk was too great. But when the count finished, there was one surprise. The vote was 6 species against, 5 species in favor, with 1 abstention. The motion fails, Admiral Brooks announced. Captain Morrison, you are ordered to maintain safe distance from the maze. Jake nodded and sat down, but as the council began to break up, Admiral Brooks walked over to the human section. Captain, she said quietly, sometimes orders get delayed in transmission. Communication problems happen all the time in deep space. Jake met her eyes and understood. Yes, Admiral, sometimes they do. As the delegates filed out of the chamber, Jake remained in his seat. Dr. Lisa Carter sat down beside him. Jake, this is insane. Even if you have better odds than other species, 12% is still a death sentence. Jake looked at the display screen, which still showed the image of the alien maze pulsing with its mysterious light. Lisa, do you know what humans used to say when they explored Earth's oceans? What? Here be dragons. Jake stood and headed for the door. The thing is, we always went looking for the dragons anyway. Jake Morrison stood at the entrance to the architect maze, wearing a basic environmental suit and carrying minimal equipment. The crystalline walls stretched up into the alien sky, pulsing with that strange blue and purple light that made his eyes water. Jake, please reconsider this. Dr. Lisa Carter's voice crackled through his helmet radio. She was monitoring him from the new frontier, orbiting high above the dead planet. Too late for that now, Lisa. Jake checked his suit systems. One more time. Oxygen for 12 hours, basic radiation shielding, and a simple communicator. No weapons, no heavy armor, nothing that might make the maze see him as a military threat. The entrance was a simple archway cut into the crystal wall. It looked almost ordinary, except for the energy readings that would have powered a small city back on Earth. All Coalition ships are tracking you, came Commander Zixtal's voice over the radio. We will monitor as long as possible. Jake stepped forward. The moment his foot crossed the threshold, the archway sealed behind him with a sound like breaking glass. The communication channel went silent. He was alone. The first chamber was about the size of a basketball court, with smooth walls that glowed softly. Jake could feel the maze studying him. Sensors hidden in the walls scanned him from every angle. He could almost sense the alien intelligence behind it all, analyzing his biology, his psychology, his species. After a few minutes, vents opened in the ceiling. Gas began pouring into the room. Jake checked his suit's atmospheric readings and laughed despite himself. The gas was a mixture of methane and ammonia, with trace amounts of hydrogen sulfide. It would kill most known species in seconds. On Earth, humans called it swamp gas. Jake had grown up in Louisiana. He'd spent his childhood fishing in bayous filled with this exact mixture. His suit could handle it easily, but even without the suit, it would just smell bad and make him cough. Really? He said to the empty room. That's your opening move? The gas stopped flowing. Jake could almost sense confusion from the maze's intelligence. It had never encountered a species that treated its first deathtrap as a minor inconvenience. Door opened on the far side of the chamber. The second room tried to crush him. The gravity increased gradually until it reached about 5 times Earth normal. Jake felt his knees buckle and his breathing become labored, but he kept walking. Human, bones and muscles were designed for a world with variable gravity. Ancient humans had climbed mountains and dove deep underwater, dealing with pressure changes that would kill most aliens. Jake's suit helped distribute the weight, and his training kicked in. He'd done high-gravity exercises his whole military career. This was uncomfortable, but not impossible. The gravity went back to normal and another door opened. The third room was a furnace. The temperature spiked to over 200 degrees Fahrenheit. Jake's suit's cooling system activated, but even without it, he would have survived for a while. Humans were one of the few species that could regulate body temperature through sweating. Ancient humans had chased prey across burning deserts by simply outlasting them in the heat. Getting warmer, Jake muttered, which probably wasn't the best joke under the circumstances. The fourth room tried freezing him instead. The temperature dropped to -50 degrees Fahrenheit. Jake's suit switched to heating mode, but again, Humans had survived ice ages. His ancestors had hunted woolly mammoths in weather just like this, wearing nothing but animal skins. The maze was starting to cycle through basic environmental hazards faster now. Room 5 had toxic radiation that would have killed most aliens, instantly. Jake's suit provided some protection, but humans had been dealing with radiation since the first nuclear accidents back in the 20th century. They'd even survived atomic bombs. Room 6, flooded with acid. Room 7 was filled with poisonous plants that released airborne toxins. Room 8 had carnivorous creatures that looked like nothing Jake had ever seen. But every single challenge was something that humans, somewhere in their violent history, had learned to survive. "Lisa, do you copy?" Jake tried his radio as he entered the 9th room. "Jake, oh thank God we lost you for hours. How are you still alive?" "Because everything this place is throwing at me is Tuesday afternoon on Earth." The 9th room was different. Instead of environmental hazards, it tried psychological warfare. The walls showed Jake images of his childhood on Earth, his dead father, his worst fears and most painful memories. Jake stopped walking and looked at the images playing across the crystalline surfaces. His father's funeral when he was 12. The girl who'd broken his heart in high school. The first soldier who'd died under his command. "Yeah, I've seen this movie," Jake said to the walls. "Earth already put me through therapy for all of this." Humans were one of the few species that regularly dealt with psychological trauma as a normal part of life. Earth was so dangerous that every human learned to cope with fear, loss, and pain from an early age. Most other species lived such safe lives that they never developed mental resilience. Jake walked through the room of nightmares like he was walking through a sad museum. The 10th room tried something new. It filled with microscopic robots, nanobots, designed to tear apart living tissue at the molecular level. Jake's suit alarms went crazy as the tiny machines tried to eat through his environmental protection. But humans had been fighting microscopic enemies for millions of years. Earth was full of bacteria, viruses, and parasites that constantly tried to kill them. The human immune system was like a military force compared to most species. Jake could feel his body responding to the nanobots, his immune system recognizing them as foreign invaders and fighting back. His white blood cell count spiked, and his body began producing antibodies at an incredible rate. "Seriously?" Jake asked as he reached the far door. "Microscopic enemies? Do you know where I'm from?" The 11th room was pure energy. Lightning bolts struck the ground randomly while plasma fields tried to disintegrate anything that moved. Jake dodged and weaved, his reflexes enhanced by millions of years of avoiding predators. Humans were one of the few species that still had functioning fight-or-flight responses. When faced with immediate danger, human reaction time was faster than almost any other known life form. The 12th room tried vacuum. All the air was sucked out instantly. Jake's suit sealed automatically, but even without it he could have held his breath long enough to reach the next door. Human ancestors had been diving for pearls and fishing underwater for thousands of years. By the 15th room, Jake could sense the maze's growing frustration. It was cycling through every known method of killing life forms, and this strange human just kept walking through them like they were minor annoyances. The maze began combining hazards, high gravity plus extreme heat, plus toxic gas, plus radiation. Jake's progress slowed, but he didn't stop. "Lisa, are you still tracking me?" "Jake, the readings we're getting are impossible. The environmental conditions in there should have killed you 20 times over." "Yeah, well, I'm from a planet that tried to kill me every day for 35 years. I'm used to it." Jake reached what seemed like a central hub. Multiple passages led off in different directions, each one pulsing with different colored light. The maze had stopped its direct attacks and seemed to be thinking. For the first time since entering, Jake felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. The maze had been testing him with known dangers. Now it was about to try something new, something it had never used on any other species. Jake picked the passage that glowed with red light and kept walking forward. Behind him, the maze sealed off the other paths and began to follow his progress, with what could only be described as intense interest. The real test was about to begin. The maze had stopped playing games. Jake Morrison found himself in a corridor that defied physics. The walls shifted between different materials. The ceiling dripped with substances that changed color and consistency every few seconds. And the floor alternated between ice, lava, and what looked like liquid metal. "Lisa, are you getting these readings?" Jake asked into his radio. Dr. Lisa Carter's voice crackled with static. "Jake, this is impossible. The computer says you're in 5 different environments at the same time." "That's about right," Jake muttered, stepping carefully across a section, a floor that was somehow both burning hot and freezing cold. "I think our friend here is getting creative." The maze had realized that standard death traps wouldn't work on a human. Now it was improvising, creating hybrid dangers that combined multiple lethal elements. Jake had to admire the engineering, even as it tried to kill him. The next room was filled with acid rain that fell upward while gravity pulled in 3 different directions. Jake's inner ear, developed from millions of years of tree climbing, ancestors helped him maintain balance even as his brain insisted that up and down had lost all meaning. "Status report, Captain," came Admiral Helen Brooks's voice through the static. "Well, Admiral, I'm currently walking through rain that burns and falls in the wrong direction while standing on a wall that thinks it's the floor." "Understood. Continue mission." Jake had to smile. Only humans would classify that situation as continue mission. Dr. Karen Bell's voice joined the communication. "Jake, I'm monitoring your biological readings. Your stress hormones are elevated, but you're adapting faster than should be possible." "Adapting to what?" "Everything. Your immune system is fighting off toxins we don't have names for. Your nervous system is compensating for gravitational changes that should cause immediate disorientation. Your brain is processing sensory input that shouldn't make sense." Jake entered a room where the air was made of fire, and the fire was made of ice. His suit's sensors gave up trying to classify the environment and just started beeping error messages. "That's the thing about humans, Doc," Jake said as he walked through the impossible mixture. "We don't need to understand something to survive it. We just need to be too stubborn to die." The maze escalated its response. The next chamber contained what could only be described as liquid time. Jake aged 10 years walking through the first day, half then got younger on the other side. His hair turned gray and then black again. His muscles ached and then felt strong. "Jake, your cellular aging just reversed itself," Dr. Bell said, her voice filled with amazement. "That's not scientifically possible." "Yeah, well, humans have been doing impossible things since we figured out how to make fire." The room after that was filled with sound that had mass and light that had weight. Jake could feel the music pressing against his skin while the bright colors left bruises on his arms. But humans had been dealing with sensory overload since they invented rock concerts and fireworks. "This is fascinating," came Dr. Alex Turner's voice. "The maze is no longer using physics as we understand it. It's creating purely theoretical environments. Theoretical or not, they still hurt," Jake said, pushing through a wall of solid silence that screamed when he touched it. The maze tried psychological warfare again, but this time it was more sophisticated. Instead of showing Jake his fears, it showed him his hopes, images of Earth, of home, of people he loved all safe and happy. Then it began taking them away one by one. Jake stopped walking and laughed. "Really? You're going to try to make me sad? Do you know what humans call entertainment? We watch movies where the dog dies, we read books where the hero sacrifices everything for strangers. We tell stories about people who lose everything and keep fighting anyway." The images flickered and disappeared. Jake could sense something like confusion from the maze's controlling intelligence. "The thing is," Jake continued, talking to the walls as he walked, "humans don't just survive tragedy. We're inspired by it. When things look hopeless, we don't give up. We get mad." The next room contained microscopic black holes that ate matter and time simultaneously. Jake's suit began dissolving molecule by molecule, but his body started replacing the damaged cells faster than they were destroyed. Dr. Bell's voice was shaking with excitement. "Jake, your cellular regeneration rate just increased by 3,000%. Your body is adapting in real time to damage that shouldn't be survivable." "Humans are good at that," Jake said casually. We've been doing it since the first cave. Man got bit by a saber-toothed tiger and decided to make a spear instead of becoming lunch. The maze tried antimatter next. Then dark energy. Then forces that human science hadn't even discovered yet. Each time Jake found a way through, not because he was stronger or smarter than the other species who had tried, but because humans had evolved to adapt to anything. The maze is learning, Dr. Turner observed. Each room is more complex than the last. It's studying Jake's responses and trying to counter them. Let it learn, Jake said, stepping through a room where matter and energy switched places every few seconds. Humans have been in evolutionary arms races with everything from bacteria to predators to the weather. We're good at this game. The rooms became increasingly surreal. Jake walked through liquid mathematics, breathed crystallized sound, and touched colors that existed only in theoretical physics. His human brain, evolved to handle the chaos of Earth's ever-changing environment, processed it all and kept functioning. Jake, the energy readings from your location are off the charts, Lisa said. The maze is using more power than our entire fleet. Good, Jake replied, pushing through a wall of time that ran backward. That means it's working hard. The maze tried one more psychological attack. This time it didn't show Jake his fears or hopes. It showed him the truth. Images of all the species that had died trying to reach this point. The brave Vorthak warriors, the brilliant Zephyrian scientists, the wise ethereal energy beings. All of them dead because they couldn't adapt fast enough. Jake stopped walking and studied the images. You want me to feel guilty about succeeding where they failed, he said to the maze. But here's the thing about humans. We don't feel guilty about surviving. We feel responsible for making their sacrifice mean something. The images faded. Those beings died trying to reach whatever's at the center of this place. Maybe it's knowledge that could help their species. Maybe it's technology that could save lives. I'm not going to dishonor their memory by quitting now. Jake reached a new section of the maze. The walls here were different, made of some material that seemed to exist in more dimensions than his eyes could process. The passages were wider, and the air felt older somehow. Lisa, I think I'm getting close to something important. Jake, be careful. The energy readings just spiked again. Jake rounded a corner and found himself facing something that made him stop and stare. Ahead of him was a massive chamber filled with swirling energy patterns that formed words and languages from across the galaxy. But mixed in with the alien scripts, Jake could see something that made his heart race. English. Mathematical equations. Human scientific notation. Lisa, are you seeing this? Jake, those are human symbols mixed in with everything else. But that's impossible. Humans have only been in space for 200 years. This maze is over 10,000 years old. Jake stepped into the chamber, and the energy patterns swirled around him like living things. As they touched him, he began to understand something that changed everything he thought he knew about the maze, about the architects, and about humanity's place in the galaxy. The maze hadn't been designed to keep people out. It had been designed to find someone specific, someone exactly like him. Jake Morrison stood in the center of the energy chamber, watching alien symbols and human mathematical equations swirl around him like living things. The patterns moved faster and faster, and he began to understand that they weren't just random displays. They were communication. The maze was trying to talk to him. Jake, your bio readings are going crazy. Dr. Karen Bell's voice crackled through heavy static. Your brain activity looks like you're having a seizure, but somehow you're still conscious and moving normally. Jake reached out and touched one of the energy patterns. Information flooded into his mind. Images, concepts, and knowledge from the beings who had built this place over 10,000 years ago. I can see them, Jake whispered. The architects. They weren't trying to create a weapon. They were trying to create a test. A test for what? Lisa Carter asked. For the next phase of galactic evolution. The energy patterns shifted and Jake saw the history of the architects' civilization. They had been peaceful, advanced, and incredibly intelligent. But they had also been safe. Their world had no disasters, no predators, no challenges that required adaptation. When they reached the stars and encountered the dangers of deep space, they couldn't handle it. Pirates destroyed their ships. Unknown diseases killed their explorers. Natural disasters on alien worlds wiped out their colonies. Despite all their technology and wisdom, they couldn't survive in a universe that didn't care about being civilized. They realized they needed something they'd evolved away from, Jake said, watching the patterns show him the architect's desperate search across the galaxy. They needed the ability to adapt to anything. The maze shuddered around him, and Jake felt a presence that could only be the controlling intelligence. It had been waiting here for thousands of years, testing every species that found this place, looking for the one trait the architects had lost. What trait? Admiral Brooks asked over the radio. Stubbornness, Jake said with a grin. The ability to look at certain death and say, "We'll see about that." The chamber began to change. The walls stretched impossibly high, and new passages opened that led to sections Jake couldn't even see clearly. The maze was revealing its true size and complexity. Jake were reading massive structural changes, Dr. Alex Turner reported. The entire maze is transforming. Jake walked toward the nearest new passage. As he moved, the energy patterns followed him, and he continued to receive information from the architect intelligence. They tested hundreds of species over the millennia, Jake explained to his team. Each one failed because they were too specialized. The Vorthak were strong but couldn't adapt to new types of danger. The Zephyrians were intelligent but couldn't handle chaos. The Ethereals were wise but couldn't function without understanding their environment first. Jake entered a new section of the maze that defied every law of physics he knew. The passages, twisted through dimensions his brain couldn't fully process. Gravity worked in spirals, light moved in curves, and time seemed to flow in multiple directions at once. But humans, Jake continued, feeling his way through impossible geometry. Humans evolved on a world that tried to kill us in new ways every day. We learned to adapt without understanding. We learned to survive without guarantees. The maze's final test began. The chamber Jake entered was a sphere of pure annihilation. It contained every method of death the maze had learned from thousands of years of testing. The environment shifted every few seconds between vacuum and crushing pressure, between absolute zero and solar heat, between toxic gas and deadly radiation, but that was just the beginning. The sphere also contained dangers that shouldn't exist, temporal loops that aged him to death and then reversed the process, gravitational fields that crushed him flat and then stretched him thin, energy that dissolved his atoms and then rebuilt them incorrectly. "Jake, the readings we're getting are impossible," Lisa said, her voice tight with worry. "You're being killed and resurrected dozens of times per minute." Jake felt every death. His body was torn apart by forces that could destroy planets, but somehow he kept walking forward. His human brain, evolved to function during life or death emergencies, shut down everything except basic survival instincts. He wasn't thinking anymore. He was just refusing to die. "His higher brain functions have shut down," Dr. Bell reported. "He's running on pure survival instinct." Jake's vision blurred and his hearing faded, but his body kept moving. This was what humans had been designed for by millions of years of evolution. When faced with impossible odds, when every logical response led to death, humans had one final option. They got stubborn. The maze threw everything it had learned at Jake. Dangers from every species that had ever lived, environmental hazards from across the galaxy, and theoretical death scenarios that existed only in mathematical models. The power output was so intense that it could be detected from other star systems. But Jake kept walking, not because he was strong enough to survive the assault, not because he was smart enough to find a solution, but because humans had learned long ago that sometimes the only way to win was to refuse to lose. "Jake, respond if you can hear me," Admiral Brooks called over the radio. Jake couldn't respond. His body was being destroyed and rebuilt so rapidly that his nervous system couldn't keep up. But some part of his mind, the part that had been shaped by Earth's endless challenges, remained focused on the simple act of putting one foot in front of the other. The architect intelligence was experiencing something it had never felt before. For 10,000 years, it had tested species after species, looking for beings capable of inheriting the architect's legacy. Each time, the tested species had been defeated by challenges specifically designed to exploit their weaknesses. But Jake Morrison had no specific weaknesses. He was a generalist, shaped by a world that had taught him to expect the unexpected and survive the unsurvivable. The maze began to understand what it meant to face a species that had evolved under constant threat. Humans didn't just survive disasters, they were shaped by them. Every generation had faced extinction and chosen to keep going anyway. The sphere of annihilation flickered and began to destabilize. The maze was using more energy than it had ever used before, pouring everything it had into creating the ultimate death trap. But Jake just kept walking through it all, like he was walking through a bad storm. "Energy readings are dropping," Dr. Turner reported. "I think the maze is running out of power." Jake's vision began to clear as the attacks weakened. His hearing returned, and he could make out voices on the radio again. The sphere around him was breaking apart. The impossible, dangers fading back into normal physics. He had done something no other being had accomplished in 10,000 years. He had broken the maze. Jake, can you hear us?" Lisa's voice was full of relief and amazement. Jake looked around at the collapsing chamber. The walls were cracking, and the energy patterns were spinning wildly out of control. "Yeah, I hear you," he said, surprised, to find his voice still worked. "I think I passed the test." Ahead of him, a new passage opened. This one was different from all the others. Instead of pulsing with dangerous energy, it glowed with a warm, welcoming light. "Jake, you need to get out of there," Admiral Brooks ordered. "The entire structure is destabilizing." But Jake was already walking toward the new passage. He had come too far and survived too much to turn back now. "Negative, Admiral. I'm going to find out what the architects wanted to show us." He stepped into the light, and everything changed. Jake Morrison stepped through the passage of light and found himself in a chamber unlike anything he had seen in the maze. The walls were smooth and peaceful, glowing with a soft warmth that reminded him of sunlight on Earth. The air was clean and breathable, so he removed his helmet for the first time since entering the maze. In the center of the chamber stood a figure made of pure energy, tall and graceful, with features that seemed to shift between different alien forms. When it spoke, its voice sounded like wind chimes and distant thunder at the same time. "Greetings, human. I am the last fragment of the architect civilization. I have waited 10,000 years for someone like you to reach this place." Jake walked closer, his boots echoing in the quiet space. "Someone like me?" Someone from a death world. Someone shaped by survival rather than comfort. The energy being gestured and the walls around them filled with images. Jake saw the rise and fall of the architect civilization, their incredible achievements in art, science, and philosophy, and their ultimate failure when they ventured into the dangerous universe beyond their safe homeworld. "We were a peaceful species," the architect explained. "Our world had no predators, no disasters, no challenges that required adaptation. We evolved intelligence and wisdom, but we lost something that we didn't realize was important until it was too late." "What did you lose?" "The ability to face the unknown without fear. The capacity to survive when survival seemed impossible. The stubbornness to keep going when all logic said to give up." Jake nodded. "You lost what humans call the hold my beer instinct." The architect paused, clearly not understanding the reference. Jake grinned. "It means the willingness to try dangerous things just to see what happens." "Yes," the architect said, its voice filled with something like wonder. "Exactly that. When we encountered the dangers of deep space, we had no response. Pirates destroyed our ships because we had never learned to fight. Diseases killed our explorers because we had no experience with hostile microorganisms. Natural disasters wiped out our colonies because we couldn't adapt quickly enough. The images on the walls showed architect ships fleeing from dangers that humans would have considered minor challenges. Space pirates that any human military unit could have defeated. Diseases that Earth's medical technology could have cured easily. Storms and earthquakes that human colonies dealt with as routine occurrences. So you built this maze to find someone who could do what you couldn't." We built this maze to find the next phase of galactic civilization. Someone who combined intelligence with adaptability, wisdom with the willingness to face danger. The architect moved closer to Jake, its energy form pulsing brighter. But you are not the first species from a death world we have encountered. Jake felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. What do you mean? The walls showed new images. Another species, bipedal and familiar-looking, with opposable thumbs and forward-facing eyes. They looked remarkably similar to humans, but older somehow, more weathered. We called them the predecessors. They came from a world much like yours, filled with danger and challenges. They found this maze long before your species even existed. Jake stared at the images. What happened to them? They passed our test, just as you have. We gave them our knowledge, our technology, our accumulated wisdom from across the galaxy. They became the inheritors of our civilization. The images showed the predecessors spreading across the galaxy, building incredible technologies, terraforming worlds, and creating wonders that surpassed even the architect's achievements. Where are they now? The architect's form dimmed slightly. They evolved beyond the need for physical form. They became something greater than any individual species. But before they transcended, they left instructions for us. What kind of instructions? They told us that the galaxy would need another species like them someday. Another people from a death world, shaped by constant challenge and survival. They predicted that such a species would arise on a world they marked in our records. Jake felt his heart racing. What world? A small planet in an outer spiral arm. A world of ice ages and volcanoes, predators and diseases, storms and disasters. A world whose inhabitants would call themselves humans. The chamber filled with new images. Earth as it appeared in the predecessors' records millions of years ago. Early humans learning to use fire, developing tools, spreading across continents despite every natural disaster their world could throw at them. You've been watching us? We have been waiting for you. The predecessors knew that humans would eventually reach the stars and find this place. They knew you would be the next species capable of inheriting galactic civilization. Jake looked around the peaceful chamber, then back at the energy being. So what happens now? The architect gestured, and new passages opened in the walls. Each one led to chambers filled with incredible technology, accumulated knowledge from thousands of species, and scientific discoveries that could transform human civilization. Now you choose. You can take our knowledge back to your people and help them become the next guardians of the galaxy. Or you can follow the path of the predecessors and evolve beyond physical existence. Jake didn't hesitate. I take the knowledge back to my people. Humans aren't ready to evolve beyond existence. We're still enjoying being stubborn and reckless. The architect's form brightened with what might have been amusement. That is exactly what the predecessors said you would choose. Jake's radio crackled to life. Dr. Lisa Carter's voice was full of concern. Jake, are you all right? We lost all readings from your location. Jake put his helmet back on and activated the communicator. I'm fine, Lisa, and I have some interesting news for everyone. What kind of news? Jake looked at the architect, who nodded encouragingly. The kind of news that's going to change everything. I'm coming out, and I'm bringing some friends with me. Jake spent the next hour in the chamber, receiving downloads of architect knowledge directly into his suit's computer systems. The information was incredible, faster than light travel that didn't require existing jump points, medical technology that could cure any known disease, terraforming equipment that could make any world habitable, and defensive systems that could protect entire star systems from any threat. But more importantly, he received the location of other architect sites across the galaxy, places where human teams could learn and grow without having to walk through death traps. There is one more thing, the architect said as Jake prepared to leave. The predecessors left a message specifically for the humans who would find this place. What did they say? The architect's form shifted, and suddenly Jake was looking at a being that could have been human. It smiled with a familiar expression of determination mixed with reckless curiosity. They said, "Welcome to the galaxy, cousins. Try not to blow anything up on your first day." Jake laughed. That sounded about right. He walked back through the maze, but this time the passages were lit with peaceful light, and the walls showed helpful directions. The journey that had taken hours of survival horror took only minutes of pleasant walking. When Jake emerged from the maze, he found the entire coalition fleet waiting for him. Ships from dozens of species floated in orbit. Above the planet, all of them focused on the small figure in the environmental suit, walking out of the crystalline structure. "Jake?" Lisa's voice was full of relief. "We thought we'd lost you." "Not yet, Lisa. Though I did die a few dozen times in there." Commander Zixtal's voice came over the radio, full of amazement. "Captain Morrison, how did you survive what killed over 800 of our finest beings?" Jake looked back at the maze, which was now glowing with peaceful light instead of dangerous energy. Soon, human scientists and engineers would be studying every chamber, learning from the knowledge the architects had preserved. "Commander, I survived the same way humans always survive everything." "Which is?" Jake grinned inside his helmet. "By being too stupid to know when to quit." He looked up at the fleet of ships waiting for him, representing species from across the known galaxy. Soon they would all benefit from the knowledge he was bringing back. Diseases would be cured, worlds would be terraformed, and the dangers of deep space would become manageable challenges instead of extinction threats. But more importantly, humans would take their place as the galaxy's designated troubleshooters. When something was too dangerous for civilized species to handle, when the unknown needed to be explored, when someone needed to walk through hell just to see what was on the other side, they would call the humans. It was, Jake reflected, exactly the kind of job humans were born to do. "Control, this is Captain Morrison," he said into his radio. "Mission accomplished. Requesting permission to come home." "Permission granted, Captain. Welcome back." Jake smiled and began walking toward his shuttle. Behind him, the architect maze continued to glow with welcoming light, ready to share its secrets with a species that had proven they could handle them. After all, they were from Earth. That said everything that needed to be said.